you. Well, you've led very nicely into my talk. Hello, my name is Jayne Goodrick, and my husband, Chris Roberts, who's here beside me off screen, was diagnosed with mixed dementia 8 years ago in 2012. My mum also had dementia. She had small vessel disease, which was diagnosed in 2014. She came to live with us, but then she decided that actually, as a family, we decided that she would be better off living with us, so that as her dementia progressed, we would be in a position to support her more fully. But it was decided that actually she would be better off at home. She wanted to go home. So whilst on paper, she was going to be, for her own good, better off with us, in her own personal choice, her spirit, actually, she was miserable here at our house, even though we had everything in place, you know, kitchen, cooking, people. But she went back home to her house where she was independent. And she may not have managed her day-to-day living to the extent that she was able to before, but it was her choice. It was her choice to go and live back home in her house. And as a family, we supported her. And my two brothers, one from London, one from Manchester, we live in North Wales, they supported her to live there until she died on December the 27th last month. And she died at home in her own bed, well, the hospital bed, but that doesn't matter. Now, as Philly said, normally I would be usually joining Chris as a double act with a buy one, get one free couple of dementia. We come as a pair. But this last 12 months, it's had a real and tangible effect on Chris's dementia. And his dementia has been very much impacted by the enforced limitations. Now, Philly said that we're both campaigners. We used to be out, we would be going here, there and everywhere. Chris has spoken at the European Parliament on disability about dementia. Obviously, since his diagnosis, we've travelled all over doing this campaigning work, and then everything stopped, and we're now doing it from home. But the enforced isolation, the enforced restrictions of the last 12 months have definitely impacted Chris's dementia. So that's why he's no longer quite so confident to come and speak, because he knows his language has been compromised. He can still articulate very well, but not quite as quickly as he used to. And so it's his choice to not join us today. He's been very much impacted by the enforced limitations. But I'd also like to thank Keith for highlighting the we in the dementia statements and the importance of the inclusion of that word rights. Now, they came about because in 2017, it used to be what we call the I statements. And the statements that were previously formed were very much aspirational. I want to have a good death, or I will have a good death. And these to be aspirational, and not everyone does have a good death with or without dementia. And that's just one of the things that springs to mind. So the Alzheimer's Society scoped the UK to find out what people like us, what Chris and I, people like Keith and Rosemary, actually wanted from the new statements. And they came up with 5 themes where we were extremely fortunate to be invited into a group of 9 people, where these themes were discussed, where the comments of people living with dementia around the UK had come up. And in that group, we wrote the first, well, what became the 5 statements. We wrote the first iteration of those statements before they then went to the Dementia Action Alliance for ratification. And I believe Keith was at that consensus event. I think it was April 2017. Keith was at that event where the group of 9 had written these statements, and the whole of the Dementia Action Alliance ratified it. But why I tell you this was because it was my Chris who insisted that the word rights were included in these statements. Now, that did raise some conversation. And were these statements that we were writing ratified by law? Yes, they were. We had them all checked out. Eventually, the argument was accepted, and there wasn't too much dissent because everybody agreed, yes, rights are so important. And as I said earlier, we, Chris and I, come as a pair. We are a we. And the group agreed with the fact that we couldn't do it on our own. There were carers, former carers. And so the statements, whilst written with and for people with dementia, the we not only applies to Chris and I, but they apply to all of us. The we are the professionals that are involved in our care. The we are the peer support we get from other people in the same situation. Mm. And we had it checked, and those the dementia statements, the we have the right is enshrined in law. But it was quite difficult to know what to write for this webinar because we don't know what we don't know. And how can we? It's only when our rights are violated or taken away that all of a sudden we become cognizant of those rights. We don't actually know what the right to a home life is until we no longer have that, until that's changed in some major way. But by then it's usually too late. Now, Chris's mantra throughout our last 8 years is that knowledge is power. I reference here Francis Bacon. Knowledge is everything. And none of us know what we don't know. And it's only afterwards with that experience we find out what our rights were. And usually, as I've said, by then it's too late. And it's not just the human rights that were written in 1947. It's also our legislative rights. It's the right to a carer's assessment. It's the right to a needs assessment. It's the right to good medical care. It's the right to having your voice heard when you say, look, I think I've got a problem here, and not being fobbed off the fact that, well, you could have dementia, but go away till it gets worse. That is a violation of our right to medical treatment. And it's not all about the medical model. But what of COVID? Well, this year, the decisions have been led by the science. Every decision the government made, they say, has been led by science. And in the world of science, evidence is everything. Even if that evidence is scant, as we've seen this past 12 months, they've been producing the evidence almost as quickly as they've been acting upon it. But sometimes we really have to go with the gut. When we know something is wrong, but there's no evidence to prove that, does not mean that it's not, that it's not wrong. And one of the biggest and less hidden but voiceless tragedies of this year has been for people living with dementia and their families, the enforced isolation. Now, Chris and I live at home. We have our adult children living with us. They've moved in and out during the last 12 months. One of them's moved home from Ireland. So we have an enforced isolation, but we are within our own family bubble. So we are not on our own lonely. Lots of people are. And the difficulty with dementia is the understanding of the rules. Now, the pandemic rules have probably violated so many conventions and rights for people with very relevant reasons why. But people with dementia may not have that capacity to reason with it. Chris has me every day to say, no, we'll do this, that, and the other, or that's not allowed. Or sometimes he might become very anxious about, no, I'm not allowed to do that. And I can explain, yes, you can, you are allowed for this, that, and the other reason. Not everybody with dementia has that. And sometimes you can have older couples where they both have dementia. And so imagine the distress and the anxiety. If my husband, who's not yet 60, is unable to come onto this webinar, part of it being his anxiety has increased so much. How much for those people that are not as aware of us, that do not have the knowledge that we have gained? But this has been apparent for the whole population, but it has impacted some far more than others. And particularly for people in later stages of dementia, this has been deathly for them. It has literally been deathly. I'm minded that people in care homes have been locked away for their own good, protected, deprived of their blood families, their outside families. This violates so many rights, and there are far more qualified people here that will be able to tell you exactly which rights were violated where. I don't know that. I just know in my gut that is not right. I don't say it's wrong because the reasons for that have come from very good intent. Sometimes that good intent is not good enough. Rights apply to us all and affect us all. But those rights are open to abuse, both by people and maintaining they have the right to do this, but also people imposing an abusive situation on someone else. The people with dementia also have a societal duty to comply with the rights that are accessible and applicable to all. So when the government says, wear a mask, unless there is another reason to wear a mask or a mental health reason, then they can very happily wear a mask. But it must not be used as a get out of jail free card. I have dementia, therefore I am not going to comply because, I mean, I've heard one gentleman say how he's argued with the security guard that he must go in the shop with his wife because he has dementia. And in the next webinar, I've heard him say, oh yes, I'm still out and about and able to go on my own. This is, whilst it's not seen as an abuse of rights, it is an abuse of privilege, if you like, an abuse of the disability rights that he's accessing in one moment and then not another. However, the difficulty with dementia is actually some days he may need to go in with his wife, and some days he may be able to go on his own. And these are the great difficulties that we have, particularly where rights and rules are involved with dementia.
Thanks, Jayne. Thank
you. Oh, sorry. Can I just ask one more? Yeah. So carers like me have been holding on, and we've been waiting for that chance to exhale. We've been waiting for the release of the enforced isolation so that we can exhale, to get some of that respite, because not everybody is like Chris and I. People are out there struggling. The people with dementia are struggling, but so too are their wives, their children, their social carers. It really is about all of us. It really is about the we in the dementia statements. Thank you.